So I know she's around. So we have Natasha, then we have Josh Freeman again. Thank you, Josh. Then my lovely friend, Professor Amanze Ejiogu is also here with us. So the moderator is Okpe. Okpe, over to you. Okay. Start at 1:55. Hi. And stop at. So do you need this? I stopped it. I started it.
Can you hear me clearly? Yes, I can. And welcome, thank you very much, our wonderful panelists on the topic, very interesting topic, which is amplifying impact, how academics and stakeholders can work together to demonstrate Black excellence. So just to kick off, the first thing definitely from the academic world is definitions, isn't it? What do we understand by impact? From your own lens and space of work, what's impact? Yeah, let me start with you, Natasha.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Tash. I work at the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology. Please bear with me. I have a stammer sometimes, so it might come up. So I'm speaking from the perspective of being a science advisor. So we really aim to bridge research from both the third sector and academia with parliamentarians to inform a debate, to inform how to scrutinize the actual government policy. And so we are there to really mobilize the knowledge and information. So the way that we see impact is that it's very hard to measure sometimes. We see that it comes in like a varied form. There's soft impact through sharing networks, sharing information, but then there's also hard impact of showing a proper case study, like a pipeline of here was the information from like an academic who has signposted to some information that can go into one of our briefings, or it can go into the way that the evidence is submitted to a parliamentary debate or team. And so I actually had a case study that I wanted to mention. So I'm sorry if I'm going to be speaking a lot really quickly, but one example that may be helpful here today for you as academics is we had someone who worked at the University of Southampton working on a project called the Work at Home project in COVID. And she'd previously worked with my team as a parliamentary academic fellow. So that means that she came to work in Parliament for 1 year and helped us in gaining primary research in understanding how fellowships are useful for academics. And so she'd worked with us through 3 different routes. So the fellowship, she helped also to inform some of our policy briefings, and then she also stayed in contact to share her actual research project. So after doing all those things, someone from her university spoke to me and asked me to write sorry, my stammer.
It's okay.
Thank you. Asked me to write a letter to also submit for the university's ref case study. So I was very, very keen to do it because she'd helped me with so much of my briefings. And so what we did there was showcase the actual bilateral kind of impact. So I got to mention how many of the how many site hits that the actual briefing got online. So my briefing on the impact of remote working on workers and organizations has been the most popular briefing for over 2 years now, and it gets around 3,000 views each month. So that's something where the academic can see they've actually shared their data, they've sat down with me, and they've had like a actual conversation to showcase why their research is important. And now that has fed into a parliamentary briefing where parliamentarians, both in-house staff and members, can use that briefing. So from the perspective of Parliament, it's how is the information there to change and make change? How is it there to raise awareness? And how is it there to raise that actual knowledge and the access of information? And the last thing that I was going to say, to also highlight, we're really keen to speak to academics in getting them to understand how they can make their information more accessible. So of course in academia, we've spent years learning, terminology and like jargon, but the people that have the key power, which I don't want to say that, but it's a very harsh kind of situation, they do not understand a lot of the jargon language. So we actually train some of the academics in how to write a actual policy briefing, which they can then submit to parliamentarians and their teams. And so all of the post notes that my team write, we all have a DOI, and the actual briefings can be helpful for academics to use for their ref. So that's one example that I wanted to share, which hopefully is some useful information for you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That's really interesting. To inform, to mobilize, and then the accessibility. Thank you. And you've given us nuggets on how we can translate what we do in the academic into much more impact. So I would go with Josh. Yeah.
Thank you. And that was really interesting what you're saying, particularly about making information accessible. If you found out a secret formula for it, I'm very interested to know, because that's a lot of what we do too. So thank you very much for having me. I heard from you earlier as well, but Josh Ring from the Higher Education Policy Institute. Today has been amazing, really, really incredible to hear the speakers this morning, and yeah, very, very grateful to be invited into the space. So thank you for having me. At HEPI, the work that we do is all about that. It is all about translating what academics do into a way that is understandable by policymakers, and I guess the reverse as well is making government understandable to people who work in education. And so the question about impact and how you measure impact is pretty essential for us. And it's actually, whenever we interview anyone from a job at HEPI, we always ask them, how should we measure our own impact? Because as a think tank, that's something that's very difficult to specify. When I was thinking about this, I think I would describe it, I would say there's probably two main kinds of impact that we want to look at. And the first one of those, I think, is very broadly just doing your job well. And I say that just doing your job well, but obviously that encompasses any number of aspects of things as an academic. It could be doing excellent teaching, it could be delivering excellent research, and how you describe excellent research could be through ref, but it could also be in terms of making an impact on the ground. So that's a whole set of categories and a whole way of measuring it. But then there's a second one, and I think that's particularly important for many of the conversations we've had today, about changing the spaces in which we all operate. So not just doing our jobs, but creating a different environment in which to do those jobs. And by that I mean, for example, increasing the number of Black professors, you know, or decolonizing, if we want to talk about that. So that sort of thing. And I think that this is that second one, changing those spaces, is really what we do at HEPI. It is, what should institutions do in order to enable academics and staff and everyone else that is involved in higher education? What can we do to change those spaces so they can all do their jobs better? And most people will really only think about doing their own jobs, but we want to think about how can we change those spaces. And I think that's a very broad way of thinking about how impact might look at impact.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Josh. So I'll come to you, Prof. What's the definition of impact?
I think what they both said, you know, resonates. But when we think about the academic's job is multifaceted. So you engage with research, you teach, you do citizenship, you engage with society. So impact would have different meanings. I was at the conference 2 weeks ago, last week, 2 weeks ago, and I met one of the professors who taught me when I was doing a master's degree. And he's old now, he's retired, he has emeritus professor. He came into the university for something else. And we met at the door, and he's had an impact on me. I'm an academic today because he inspired me. If it wasn't for him, I doubt if I would be an academic today. So that's impact on one level from his teaching. From research, I mean, both of you have talked about, kind of impact from research, and you will get, you would get that. You would generally in the UK, we think in terms of ref and, how do you, demonstrate impact. But I think we need to think outside that box of the ref. We research different things. For me, I research social issues. What difference does my research make to the people who I research? I was researching modern slavery in Nigeria, and one of the participants asked me, "Look, you're not the first people to come and interview us. We've been interviewed severally, but we don't see any change in our lives. What is this research project going to do for us?" So I need to think about impact in those terms also. If you look more in the continent, there's more of a tradition of academics engaging with social issues. So you have academics as activists, you have academics writing in the newspapers regularly. In the UK, we don't have so much of that culture, but I think the role of an academic is also to engage with society, to have that impact on shaping societal discussions, on shaping ideas. So I think impact is much broader than we look at it, because we kind of narrow and focus on what the ref wants.
Thank you very much. That's quite interesting. So building on what you've all said, you've explained that impact is really about providing that information, mobilizing, doing your job well, the accessibility, and especially the down to earth, those that are actually making use of whatever data you're collating. And honestly, I think many of us in this room, on a very good assumption, we actually engage in these things. So my next question will be the why and how do we then amplify these things? In terms of the impact we're making in our respective corners, how do we amplify it? What do we do? And why should we amplify it? Okay, so should I go with you, Prof?
How do you amplify impact? So you want to be able to publicize the work you are doing. You want to be able to, in a sense, amplifying impact is about building networks and working through those networks. So it's not just about shouting and letting everybody see you're doing this kind of stuff, but how do you galvanize a network to actually do something about that issue? So Mercy and I are doing some work around social housing, and we've kind of built a network of civil society actors in that space, landlords, regulators, people who together can make a difference. And that's, to my mind, how you try to amplify impact.
Thank you, Nat.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a few notes here. I think to amplify is important because, like you mentioned, with networking, with being able to collaborate, you're amplifying the awareness and you're amplifying voices, but essentially you're also sharing that there is actually a diversity in thought and in the knowledge of Black people. We are not a a monolith, and I'm sure that we all know this in the room, but when you're sharing your research and you're sharing your knowledge, you're sharing the actual change in research and history and like showcasing that. And as we already know, I think I looked at research and saw that only 1% of the actual professors in academia are Black, and 27, I believe, are from the entire like workforce of academia. So to amplify is to speak for that entire group of people so that we can further progress. That was the first thing that I wanted to say. The other thing also is to have longer term impact. So you're amplifying to really steer things. And as you were speaking, I thought of the late Bell Hooks, and she has that book, and Teaching to Transgress, and she says that the classroom is the most actual radical space to actually transform. So if we're utilizing the classroom, what actually happens past the classroom? And so now thinking of her and being here is actually very like emotional, because I know that I've been able to be who I am through the voices of teachers that have amplified their knowledge and their passion for teaching. And now I'm in places where there's change and there's further impact. So that's one reason why I'd like to amplify the impact of the work of actual Black academics. And the last thing is to embrace all of the opportunities. So I think you amplify impact by showcasing other opportunities. So I saw that one of the topics here that we're going to speak about is how to further your actual career. And I think you're amplifying by showcasing opportunities of, for example, doing a fellowship. Some people want to stay in academia but don't realize that you gain more skills and actual more like soft skills and more networks by doing other things like a fellowship in government or in Parliament. So I'm trying to make it all connect in that answer, but that's what comes to mind.
Thank you very much. Josh,
Yes, I agree with all of it. I'll touch on that second point again because that's particularly important. That point. I'd talk about three things. I'd say I'd talk again about networks. I think that networks are essential. I was having a conversation just in the break about the report and how the people that we sent it to, and whether that we should have, for example, should we have gone through each university if we'd had the time and thought who in this university could put these things into action, and sent it to them and said, we'll speak to you about this, and if you want to know about it, we can talk to you about it. That's a lot of resources to do, and an individual academic can't do something like that. But that sort of thing, building those networks of people who can put this into practice. The second that I would say, which Natasha just spoke about, was about having the ability to speak another language, and that might mean integrating with the sorts of those other sectors that can start to put these things into practice. So, for example, doing a secondment with a different organisation, or with working in industry, or so on. And the value of that is not just because of the skills that you get in that, though I think that's enormously valuable. I don't think as many people do it as they should, partly because it's so complicated and difficult to do, but also because you learn how to speak the language of another organisation. Yeah. And I think that's crucial. So I was previously, before I worked in policy, I was a teacher, and that's essential because it means that I can speak a language that to educators that makes sense to them. I think teachers often become very frustrated when civil servants some civil servants speak to them and they don't understand the pressures, for example, that they're under. They make jokes about teachers having long holidays, that sort of thing. And it's not appropriate. Yeah. So being able to speak that language is essential, because if you have a powerful idea, it doesn't become powerful until it's put into practice. And that's a very slow process, but it requires you speaking that language. And the last thing I would say is some of the biggest impact that academics can have is on their teaching and the people that they teach, and they will go on to make an enormous impact in their own fields, whatever that may be. And I think it's a bit of a scandal how little we train teachers in higher education in the UK, how little support that they get in order to actually, so as a secondary school teacher, I had years of training. You have to go through rounds and rounds. You have to be accredited in different ways, and there's none of that process for higher education. And I don't know why, if you're teaching a 17-year-old, that you should do all of that, but an 18-year-old, you shouldn't have to do any of it. I find that really striking, and I think the risk of that is that we don't foster necessarily the very best classroom discussions or the very best evidence-based practice that we can in our classrooms. And I think that's a missed opportunity. So I would look at that.
Interesting. Thank you. Okay, yes.
Just to come back on that on teaching and networks, we tend to think about our networks as people who we meet and who, outside academia and that. And we tend to forget that our students become part of our networks. For the PhD students, yes, it's obvious. You finish with them and they go on to come back into academia. But for our master's students, for our undergraduate students, I have students who have kept in touch with, who, I follow their progress, who, I still mentor, who, may or may not become something very big, but I hope that wherever they are, they will make a difference there. And I think it's part of my role to help them continue to do that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And just to build on what we've all discussed, it's interesting that when we have a very strong belief in an essence, then naturally we're thinking on how do I amplify this? How do I project it forward? And that also goes line in line in sharing best practices, nationally, internationally, locally, oh, this is what I do. This is what we do in our institution. I think you might be able to, for example, maybe how do we get our graduates employable ready, especially in the age of all these technology revolutions. So how do we do that? Oh, these are the thought process. Or with AI and assessment or assignments, how are you designing it? What are you going to do differently? So how do we share these best practices amongst ourselves, universities, and also internationally? So those are also ways that we can find ways to amplify what we do in our respective places. Awesome, thank you very much. So now we've discussed we understand about impact, we understand why and how we can amplify this impact. Now, turning the clock back to us, how does this help us in our career progression? So in what way do we shape our research, our teaching, our different project citizenships, and how does that feed into our career progression? Yeah, Prof.
It's an interesting question. How does it feed into our career progression? A lot of the universities in the UK will talk about impact in terms of ref, and a lot of them will encourage us to do impact case studies and things like that. But when it comes to promotion, impact is not as high up on the agenda. So they want to see your papers, they want to see your contribution to citizenship, and the kind of research impact is not that high up. But if you look at it that way, you are looking at it short term. Yeah. If you take a longer term perspective on impact, as an academic, what you want to do is to make change in society, and change takes time. So the work you do will ultimately get recognized. It will ultimately contribute to building a strong profile as an academic, but it will take time. It will not be a fast, progression, if you like, taking an impact route. But I think, it's worth it doing it.
Yeah. I'd like to say exactly what you said. So I'm going to slightly repeat things, but maybe come from my perspective. So firstly, I am not an academic. I want to admit that. But I am so grateful for academics. And I still actually work with my university. So I actually do tours in Parliament, and I bring the students in to share with them what it's like to work in Parliament as a woman of colour, which in itself has its own challenges. So a lot of what we've said here about biases and silos, you experience that, which is even more important why you need to amplify your impact of your research. And what actually came to mind is we've already spoken about the power of gaining experience elsewhere, and your actual portfolio and your actual profile. It helps you network with people that have a similar passion, and that can be, like you said, internationally, nationally, and also locally. And so for example, thinking of the longer term perspective, my former academic a lecturer still speaking to me means that obviously now I can help her with the tours in Parliament, and so she gets more feedback, from her students. So I think it's more of a natural relationship, and it's something circular. So when you think of impact, you aren't only thinking of your institution. You should be thinking all the time, I'm contributing to the wealth of information for all of my community. And so, for example, I go back to Uganda a lot as well, and I try to do workshops there to share in how to engage with like policy, but also with your personal well-being. So I think always thinking in the longer term and thinking, thinking from a wider perspective. And I have to obviously go back to Parliament as well. I think a lot of the academics that I've spoken to, yes, you don't get more money for doing these secondments. However, it's so fulfilling, and they get to meet people in wider organizations as well as institutions that are in think tanks, in research and in academia, where in the longer term, they can signpost to other, research kind of opportunities and things that are grassroots as well. So I think when you do something for the greater community, it's not only helping you, but it's something that I'm trying to say that always comes back. It will always come back to you, and it will always actually come back to your students if you're still teaching. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's worth, and this question, I think this is a great question, thinking about how for career progression, institutions measure impact, or how they look at people having, when they're considering, for example, for promotions, what do they look at? And in terms of the people that tend to be vice chancellors and senior leaders, very often they've come from the research route, for example, rather than the teaching route. And incidentally, it is men who disproportionately do research and women who disproportionately get put into teaching, which is why more men become vice chancellors, broadly speaking. But I think connected to all of this is prestige. Ultimately, it's prestige that universities value, and it's prestige that they tend to promote. And so people doing prestigious things like research that gets the university, that puts the university in good stead because of ref, that tends to be warrant further promotions. But one thing that came very strongly in the research that Becca and I did was that Black academics told us they were spending so much time on mentoring or sitting on interview panels or doing EDI work that is taking up all of the time that would be spent, and is being spent by others who aren't Black, doing research and doing teaching, that is then allowing them to get promotions. So that time and this workload, that workload issue that Becca was talking about earlier, is preventing that impact. I think it's having an impact in another way, but it's also preventing academics boosting their own careers. And I think sometimes we have to be very careful between. Sometimes you need to be unashamed in pushing your own career, and that's better for others in the long term too, because you can get bogged down in doing these things that don't get you recognition. It's very tricky, but I think that the thing that we need to do as a sector is recognize that much more and attach more of the prestige that we attach to research, for example, to lots of these activities.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. And picking on what you've said, Josh, it seems like a gray area. And that leads to my next question, because you've emphasized on, okay, long term, think about long term, but really, as ECR, and all I'm thinking about is progression. I want to be Professor Ope someday. So at what point how do I balance this? Is it at my ECR I'm considering impact, or when I get to senior leadership position, then later on, then at least I know that I'm already there, then I can start considering impact. So at what career stage do we consider this strategically? Prof, do you want to say something?
I tend not to think about impact like that. I think impact comes from here.
Yeah.
And in whatever you do, so we talk about striving for excellence. You strive for excellence in teaching, you will make an impact. Yeah. In my research, in whatever research I do, I'm always thinking, how is this going to make an impact? And so at whatever stage you are, impact should be built into projects. And once you do that as of habit, you will see that it just comes naturally. It's something, that is done. So I wouldn't think about it as a box to tick for my career progression. I would think about it as an integral part of whatever it is I'm doing.
Yeah, awesome. I agree. Josh, what do you think?
I agree. I don't have too much to add to that, other than I don't think you can do anything in academia without thinking about impact. And I think whenever you do any project, that you're ultimately, even if you know it's a piece of research that won't be picked up maybe for 10 or 20 years, ultimately we are thinking, well, hopefully, maybe in a way that this will have some kind of long-term impact. I think that's essential. Really, academia is it's a step removed. So the work that we do, the policy work that we do, is the impact is much clearer because we write policy recommendations and we hope that people will pick them up and use them and they're ready to go. Academia, the journey is much longer, but ultimately the end goal is the same, which is improving whichever area, sector you're focusing on.
Yeah.
This is a thought, because I'm not an academic, it's a thought. I've noticed that those academics that do these secondments, these fellowships that work, or those that still are fully in academia, but they're just regularly submitting their research into a report for Parliament or for the Commons or the Lords, they are then adapting and learning about the other environments, like you said, with like language, but also in their portfolio now, it's very versatile, and it's a way to show that you can adapt very quickly. And if you then build those external soft skills, when you're speaking to people that are on the boards that are, here to promote you, there's a way in which you can showcase to them, I know how to work with this policy institute, or for example, my actual briefing work or my research, was used in an inquiry report that was then actually brought to a actual debate in the chambers. That's something that your fellow people that you're probably people that you're trying to compete against and don't really have that. So my perspective is just, once again, I am speaking from my perspective of Parliament, but gaining all of these extra things can be a bit draining because you're then balancing your research work with impact, but it's going to support you in putting yourself forward and showing what's actually different about you and how you've looked more further in your scope in how to have an impact.
Perfect.
I think also, just picking up on your point there, you engage with Parliament once, and then tomorrow Parliament is looking for somebody to do something in this area.
And they'll hire
you. They are their first pick. Let's talk to him first. Or you do something with the ministry, and then they are looking for they come back to you. So eventually it pays off.
Yeah, thank you. And that leads nicely to my next question, which is the collaboration. So collaboration between academics and stakeholders like, Parliament, HPI, yourself. How does this help us demonstrate the Black excellence? How can we work together? What's the whole essence? What's the goal we're striving in? And how are there challenges? Are there issues within it? How do we overcome it, especially for the Black society?
Yeah. So I believe that we naturally end up working in silos a bit, and that's both in policy and in academia. And I think it takes an extra effort to overcome silos, but the fact that you're talking about it and we're here and we're at a networking event, these are examples of steps in trying to overcome silos. So being able to collaborate not only in the research project, but in sharing ideas, I think is the first step. And I think, like you said earlier again, it's the longer term. We're doing it to make room, and we're doing it to create space for the future students that want to be PhDs and then obviously go on to be in academics. We are doing it for them. Of course, like you said, it's a personal gain, it's your life, it's your actual quality of life that you have to consider. But who are we actually doing it for, and how do we create further space? And that is through, being able to collaborate. So I don't know the details in how it is to find grants and find funding. That's another level that I cannot speak on. But I know that by collaborating and sharing ideas on the beginning of the roots of planting seeds for future projects is something that's going to have a longer term impact, and will, once again, like I said, it will try to amplify the voices of Black people in academia.
Collaboration is an interesting thing, and I will not tell you that it's easy to do. the system we're working is stacked against people of color, blacks and people of color. I will not tell you that there's no racism in the system. It's there and it's evident. Yeah. So when you start to think about collaborations, you want to build networks, you want to draw people into, say you're applying for a grant, you want to be able to put a team together. Other people are also applying for stuff and want to put a team together. Would they call you to join the team? Would you be their first choice? Would it be a white guy who will be their first choice? You know, in putting your own team together, will people accept to join your team or not?
Yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of nuance to it. There's a lot of hard work. But I guess as you grow and develop, your work starts to speak for itself, and people recognize that person knows what they are doing. That person can make a valuable contribution to this project. So that's on grants, but also, like Natasha had said earlier on, build those networks. If it's a school governorship, go and sit on the school governors. If it's a non-exec director, go and be a non-exec director. Whatever it is, join your professional organization. Do, go for the networking events. Build those networks. It's through those networks that you start to build collaborations.
Okay.
I'm gonna add one, sorry. Being brave as well, so think outside of the box. So sometimes we see a grant or we see a project and it's to one specific institution and you stop there. But you'd be so surprised if you start to brainstorm and sit down and actually think of ways to partner. They're actually impressed. They're like, actually, I would love to work with the organization, or I'd love to work with that actual think tank or that actual local grassroots charity. And then you have a wider team, and then you can leverage more because that person in that team in that charity knows someone else. So this is wider projects than just like a research project, but I'm thinking of wider ways to be brave and think outside the box with that regard. And then you can help each other, to overcome those challenges. So by even reaching out, yes, you're going to collaborate, but you're going to support each other in what we all go through. Like you said, we're like facing so many challenges and biases that we are hyper visible and we're also actually not visible at the same time. It's the most paradoxical experience I've lived in my life, but it's real. So by having those, those networks, it sounds so cliche, but they will be what actually helps you get through. So both in academia and outside.
Yeah. Before I go to Josh, linking on what you've said. So I think at some point, so imagine, Prof, you're part of the team bidding for this grant from ground up. Do you think anything stops you from having any ECL to sort of shadow you, see the process, getting those sort of knowledge of you that, oh, this has been done, then they can form their own team. So rather than them waiting for that special time when they feel they are well grounded, they can do this themselves. So that's one part. Now, in terms of the team, is there a way that these grant bodies can look at it? How diverse is this team? Are they all white men? Is there female in it? Is there blacks? So there are some other areas that we can also see. What can we do? What are the things we can intentionally do? Picking on Dr. Professor Wayne's word. So those are the things I'm picking up. But Josh, what can you add to this?
Yeah, I think it's been well summarized. But I would add one thing, which is that there are so many problems which are sector wide, and we don't realize, or we don't talk to each other, and we get siloed, as Tash was saying, or we don't realize that others have found solutions to these problems already. Yeah. We're not implementing them. So about a year ago, I was doing research on how universities were supporting students with the cost of living crisis, and everyone had their own initiatives, and one trend that we were spotting was no one knew whether any of the things that they were doing were working. They were just doing them, but they had no way of measuring them, and every single institution basically had the same problem. And if they had spoken to each other and shared some of these solutions, they would very quickly have found ways of measuring and checking and reaching those difficult students who otherwise they couldn't reach, but because they weren't speaking to each other, they couldn't find those solutions together. So collaboration, I think it is very difficult. I think it's particularly difficult in academia because institutions are really competing against each other in lots of ways. And so in some ways, collaboration is discouraged sort of implicitly. But I think very often that's a shame. And I think we should try and seek out those opportunities if we can.
Thank you very much. Now, leading nicely is my next question will be based on how then can we empower the ECR Black communities, especially towards amplifying impact for career excellence and progression? What are the practical steps in terms of empowering one another in this space?
I mean, so I was on the train coming in the morning and I listened to the earlier sessions online, and it was interesting to see the idea of mentoring come up again and again. Yes, mentoring will be one of the ways. I guess for an ECR, there's a part of it which you want senior academics to be able to handhold the ECR and to help the ECR progress. But there's also the part of it where the ECR needs to also step up. So I won't handhold somebody who doesn't want to be handheld. So it's a two-way kind of thing. But yes, for me, some opportunities come my way, and I think about them and I say, as much as I can do it, I want to do it, but why not pass it on to people earlier in their career? It will benefit them more. Like you were talking about grants, bring people up on grants. You're going to start writing a paper, get somebody else involved in that. Building networks, the same way opportunities we talk about, speaking opportunities to network, to join boards or stuff, get the ECRs involved. But like I said, you can only go so far. This ECR needs to show that interest also. I can keep on passing opportunities to you and you don't take any of those opportunities. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe to an extent, we need to know the why. Why are you not taking these opportunities? Are there some challenges you're facing? Are you scared? 9 out of 10, just stepping into the waters and knowing that, okay, even though I can't swim, I think I can float or I can hold your hands. So I think, Prof.
So yes, so there's an ECR I have, in my university, and person has finished their PhD but not gone on to do anything else after the PhD, and a lot of that is confidence. So what I would say is, I'm starting this project. Come join me on the project.
Yeah.
And if we're going to do an interview, I'll do the interview with you. Sit down. So it's all part of mentoring. It depends on who you get as a mentor. So choose your mentor carefully. I know the university assigns mentors to people when they join the university. They assign you a mentor, they assign you a buddy. I don't think I've talked to any of the mentors I've been assigned. It's just, it's time to do my annual review. I need the mentor to tick a box, so he ticks a box. So those are not my real mentors. So go outside those, formal kind of circles. Look for a mentor who will take an interest in you.
True. Thank you. That's beautiful. Josh, what do you want to add?
Yeah. I'll take a policy perspective as we're a policy body. So 3 things I think that universities could do that would be really helpful and that would make a big impact. And the first has to be mentorship. I think we've mentioned this at every session today. Is the mentorship is essential, and it's essential for the reasons that I put up on the screen earlier. That the Black ACAs that we spoke to don't feel they understand promotion criteria. There's no clarity on their routes to progression. The mentorship is one solution to that, but it's a solution to other things. It's also, if you have two-way mentorship, it's a solution to your senior leaders not understanding what Black ACAs are going through. That's great, and we're not having that at all, really. I think that there should be a formal system that makes sure every ACA gets a mentor, a proper mentor, and that those mentors are not just ticking boxes, but actually that they understand how to teach and how to be a good mentor. And in those cases where it doesn't work out, they should get a different mentor. I think that should be essential, and I think that would solve a lot of problems. The second thing is that we should be taking steps to alleviate the specific burden that Black academics face. So one thing that Becca suggested, I don't know if it made it into the report, but it was the idea that there might be people who were willing to be paid, for example, to sit on interview panels, who could do that instead of academics from that institution being constantly drafted in without reward to do so. Things like that would alleviate the burden that falls disproportionately on people without recognition. And then finally, I just think we need to speak to our staff a lot more. We need to hear their perspectives, and we need to include them in the decisions that affect them. I don't think that those formal processes are very good at the moment. I think we need to. I think we need to fix that.
Thank you. Before you mention, can I clarify? We've been using the word mentors, mentorship. Is this different from line manager, or is the same person?
Different, very different.
All right, good. Okay, go on, Natasha.
I have quite a few things to say now. So just off your point on speaking to each other, I'm going to come from a people kind of perspective. We as humans require psychological safety to grow. And the academic space is not exactly the most psychologically safe space. So the first step is finding one another. I know it sounds very obvious, but if you don't have an ally, someone who's of color, but also someone who's not of color, because I've learned a lot from speaking to, and they're not all of them, but some of them are an ally who share what I could do in that actual situation where I do have that fear of, is this paranoia or is this implicit bias? And you need that person to sit down with you. So I'm coming from a people's perspective, empower one another because we are a actual community of Black people, but also knowing who is your trusted circle. I'm in that institution. In Parliament, I've literally hosted 3 workshops on actual mindfulness and healing for the Black staff or staff of color, because I know it's not going to be offered, actually by Parliament. And if we have a health and wellbeing service, you're going to be given a counsellor who's white. So it's about finding one another, finding that safe space so that you know what is my next step and how can I say this in a safe manner first. So that's the actual people side of things. So we mentioned mentorship. There's mentorship and there's coaching. So a mentor is there to kind of give you the steps, showcase to you, and a coach will kind of sit down there and work through those goals. Why do you need to work on that? What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, and how can we build on your strengths? And so I think being able to speak to your mentor or your line manager and ask them for a more coach-focused method, it really helps me personally. The following thing is storytelling. So having a mentor is great and having a coach is great, but do you have the actual processes in the organization or even in your networks like here, where people are sharing their story in a way that you can actually relate? Because the landscape is always changing, and there are different, obviously, landscapes. There's the research landscape and there's the policy landscape. So, for example, I try my best to share my story with the students that I said that I speak to, so that when I'm sharing my story of being a stammerer, being someone from a working class background, being someone who has had my own challenges, and I'm now in a very interesting but great institution, how did I get there? And so that's not just coaching and mentorship, that's storytelling. And so we as humans, we fall in love with a story. We love stories. And so knowing your story and knowing who you can hear from and learn from. And my other thing really quickly was sharing opportunities, which sounds very basic, but it's one of the most important ones. Sharing different opportunities, like we said, across the actual different sectors. You'd be surprised how many people would love to hear from an academic or have them come and work there, shadow there. One a really interesting pathway that I find interesting is speaking to academics that are actually in the health sector. So thinking of that as well, like how you can go into other organizations, but also into sectors like the health sector, working on a different integrated board, for example. Yeah, I hope that helps.
I think one of the things early career researchers need to do quite early on is to learn how to say no.
Oh, that's a good one.
Vital. You know, I remember when I joined an institution which I won't name now. I was the only black in the faculty, and the dean called me in and said she was thinking of setting up something around equality and diversity, you know, whether I would be interested in championing that. And I told her no, straight up, because I thought she was just trying to tick a box. And, you know, here was this black young guy who had landed there who could help her tick that box. And so I said no. And I don't regret saying no. So it's something you need to learn how to do, you know, quite early on. The other thing is peer mentorship. So we tend to talk about mentorship top down. Your peers also, you know, are very good mentors, and they can help hold you accountable. I'm lucky to have, you know, a lot of peers who can do that for me. Very early on, my younger brother is also an academic, so that worked very well for him, for both of us actually. You know, somebody I trusted, and he could come tell me, you know, you messed it up there.
Hold you accountable.
Yeah. So we need people who, you know, peers who can do that for us.
Thank you very much. I know time is really, I don't know where time has gone. So take over to the girls. Please, do you have questions for us? And as we're getting onto that, it's really interesting saying no and thinking long term. I might have problem with that because I don't know which one is going to be very useful in that long term. All right, questions to them.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Fatih Ejiogu. I'm from UWI Bristol. We say a lot about mentorship, and somehow I'm overwhelmed with the name being a mentor. So, but I'm throwing this question back to you or as a challenge. How many ECLs have you sponsored? Not mentored. We don't need mentors. We have a lot of mentors. We need actions. We need opportunities. How many ECLs have you sponsored? Have you created opportunities for? So I think if you have that free time, reflect on it, because I get so overwhelmed with mentoring. I'm tired of bearing mentors, you know, that word. How many ECLs have you sponsored? Ask yourself. And then we can now continue the discussion. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. Could I help? Could you clarify what you mean by sponsor?
What I mean is, how many ECLs have you opened opportunities for? Have you created opportunities for? How many? ECLs are working so hard. We do acknowledge that, but how many have you opened opportunities for? Not advice. I don't need advice. I have a lot of people who advised me, you know. Have you really opened that door for me? Have you signposted me to someone that will open the door for me? You know, have you? I'm throwing it back to you all.
So who wants to answer that?
I think that's an interesting question. And when you say how many ECRs do you open the doors for, I could throw the question back and say, do they recognize the doors when I open them for them?
Interesting.
You actually tell them that is the door that will lead them to, you know, where they will make it in life. where they will succeed, because not everyone knows this is a door that would lead you to opportunities. I think the awareness is lacking in us. I would say I'm probably ECR stroke mid-career level. But I think we're not, nurtured to get opportunities. And so even when it is close to us, we don't really understand. We're not aware of it. So we need someone to tell us, like, you know what, this is, don't you see this? We don't have that in the Black community. We don't.
Interesting. I can hear we do.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to chip in? All right. So please, over there.
Sorry, I just want to share my thoughts. Now, if you say sponsor, is it spoon feeding? Because you can't chase people with opportunities, and that ECR needs to be intentional about wanting change and going for. Now, just like you said, when somebody throws a green light, you need to grab it. I can't start chasing you with opportunities. And a lot of people would want you to spoon feed them, chase them. Sadly, nobody has the time.
Let me tell two stories.
Okay.
Let me tell two stories. Yeah. The first one, a journal sent me something to review, a paper to review, the way they would normally send to people. Very good, well respected journal. And I knew for this journal, if you refuse or you say I can't review, they ask, who can do this, recommend someone. So, I could very well have done the review. I said, no, I can't do the review. And I recommended an ECR. Yeah. It's left for the ECR to pick up that. I won't go to the ECR. I told the ECR I've recommended you. Yeah. But I won't go to start explaining to the ECR, if you take this opportunity, then maybe you'll get another review from the journal. The editors will start to know you, and I expect the ECR should.
Yeah.
That's why a society like this, breaking barriers in academia, knowledge and awareness is not there. That is what we're doing now. I mean, not all ECRs have that luxury to know that would pave way for other opportunities. And that's why we need people who are up there, to really pay attention, be patient with ECRs, I think patience is key, because, how will I put it? We all have our strengths and weaknesses. And so, and we have our disabilities as well, and challenges, I'll say that. So sometimes you may not be conscious of or be aware of the benefit of something, but I feel that level of details, I think is what I see in other.
Let me pass you. Dr. Wayne, please. Yeah.
I think you're right. And what I'm going to say is this. It's about demystifying the system, right? Okay. Because what's the problem is, it's not just at the ECR stage. You have, when you talk about widening participation, students coming in from first generation who've never been to university before, they get caught up in this strand. Bernadine said that her mother told her, go and ask questions, right? But actually, who is it that you need to go and ask the questions to, right? If you're unaware or you don't know, in the USA, a guy called Anthony Abrahams Jack wrote a book called The Privileged Poor, okay? And he spoke about 3 different types of individuals. One individual who was entered into the system. They were from a poor background, but they entered the system very early, right? From about age 10, 12. So they learned how to navigate their way through the system. Then they had somebody else who was about, who entered the system at university level, right? Brilliant academically, but they didn't understand the system. So they weren't able to navigate their way through.
Yeah.
And then you've got the privileged who actually know the system inside out.
Yeah.
So they know how to take advantage of the system as they go through the system. So what's the solution to this? The solution is demystifying the system so that anybody who's coming in understands the system that they are in.
Yeah.
So as a sponsor, you can't guarantee that I open this door and you're going to get this position. But what you can do is say, right, now that we're offering this position, what are the intentional steps?
Yeah.
As Bernadine had said, what are the intentional steps that you need to take to make the most of this situation that you've now found yourself in? So you have to be proactive as well, but the system can be done more. More can be done by the system to demystify it so that other people, when we're talking about EDI, inclusion, what does inclusion actually mean? Inclusion means that you take down those barriers and you're not just in the room, but you're participating within the system.
Awesome, thank you so much. I don't know. I'm in a fix right now because we have to move to the next session. This is quite well. Okay. Okay, so please, can I have Lady in Red? Okay, all right, thank you. After we have Lady in Red and Dr. Ogale.
Oh, okay. Who's the lady in red? Sorry. I think it gets to a stage that we also have to recognize that nobody's coming to save you. Like, you have to go out looking for these opportunities. Oh, they didn't promote me. Oh, they didn't promote me. What are you actually doing? How proactive are you being in looking for these opportunities? How proactive are you being in mingling with the right people? How proactive are you being in actually doing something and not expecting that the promotion is literally going to come and fall into your lap? It doesn't work that way. I mean, for anybody who thinks it does, it really doesn't. You have to be proactive. You have to go looking for the opportunities. Yes, it is not fair. Yes, we're all Black academics. Okay. After all of that therapy session, what are the steps that you are taking to move yourself to that next position? So I think that's all I wanted to really add to that.
I think in response to that, I think, yes, you have to be proactive, but yes, the senior Black academics have a role to play. They have a powerful role to play. I'm a professor, yes, but there are much senior professors than I am. I had the fortune of meeting one of them, a Black lady, a couple of years ago, and she's been extremely helpful to me, you know. So I think the senior Black academics have a role to play in developing, you know, the ECRs and mid-career researchers, but they can only go so far. They also need your help from the other side.
All right, thank you. Lady in Red, please.
Thank you. I like that my title. I'm going to use it. Lady in Red. Just because Fatiha was talking about ECR and I'm ECR, so I feel like I have to say something. And also because Professor just mentioned about demystifying the system, which I think is the core of the issue. So I am newly appointed, and I feel very. I always say they throw me in the water and say swim, and then up till now I never learned the techniques, which is funny because I really can't swim. So it's a bit. I never learned the techniques. I know how to float. Not in real life, but I know how to float in the system, but I don't know where to go to. I was very privileged because I have many mentors. I am really privileged in that sense, but the mentors that were assigned to me through the leadership system programs that I've been in were, ironically enough, the least helpful. So the mentors I actually approached individually and asked for their support were the ones that were more helpful, and they were the ones who helped me to approach where I am now. Yeah. But and they are not Black academics at all, not even of color. So and not even females. So it's a bit ironic that it doesn't always work the way we want it. what I wanted to reiterate is the demystifying the system, because as an international student, I spent a while trying to understand where to look for things, and then trying to find out how to survive as a student, and then trying to find out where to look for jobs and so on. So all the time I'm trying to figure out how the system works. Finally, I understand it, hopefully, to some extent that they can actually survive. But starting as an academic, that's a completely new world. And there is a lot of support in the university, which is always very, very helpful to have. There is very rich websites and very, very rich with resources, and very supportive team, and very supportive medium and early career. I don't know what you call the opposite of early career, but that one. They are very, very supportive, but where to go and where to find this information in the bombards of emails that you cannot find your way through. So it's a lot to do at the same time, where you have to teach, you have to mentor, you have to mark and put exams and lecture and submit something proposals and all of that. So it's a bit overwhelming. The academic life is a bit overwhelming. A bit. I'm trying to be polite here. It's a bit overwhelming, but it still needs to be demystified for early careers, because I think that's the main problem we're having, that we don't know where to go.
Awesome.
Sorry, that was elongated.
Thank you very much. All right, so I know there's a lot, but sorry, we have to move on. So last words from my panelists, please.
Okay, my last words is to, of course, try to engage you all. So if you follow POST, which is the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology, or you follow the Knowledge Exchange Unit, and they have a separate Twitter, which is a Research in Parliament, you can look for loads of opportunities where you can become a specialist advisor, where you can also submit your research, or just even sit on an interview to inform a policy briefing. I'm now doing a briefing on personalized medicines for a sickle cell, and it's the first time that the entire organization has even written on sickle cell. So it's about being brave enough to say, this is needed, here's my expertise. And it's the first time that I've actually engaged with a lot of academics of color, because I'm writing on sickle cell. So it's an example of meeting in the middle and helping each other there. And I wanted to say something in response to the whole being like a mentor. What do you have to offer? Often we're thinking of taking, which is not bad, like I said, personal gain earlier. But when you go to approach a coach or a mentor, how can you help them? Which then it's kind of like a way to support someone in helping you. They can maybe, with some writing work or just something where you can also help them. It will then falsify that actual relationship, and it will help both of your careers.
Thank you very much. Josh,
Sorry.
just 30 seconds.
Please. Yes. The only thing I will say, thank you very much. This has been hugely enlightening, and I think that discussion was really particularly helpful for me in understanding what people's position was. So thank you. And the only thing I will say is that this is only the first stage of the research that we're doing with Gate and B, Sanderson and SBA. It is with the next stage, we'll be looking at people later on in their careers, so professors, associate professors, assistant professors, this sort of thing. And we really want to speak to you if that's you. So please do come and speak to us or get in touch. I'm sure SBA will provide my details.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh. Prof.
I think for me, impact is about making a difference in society, but not just making a difference in society, making a difference in society by doing things which you enjoy doing. So I would encourage you, get involved with things which are of interest to you. Try to make a difference in society, but enjoy the journey. Make friends along the way, and build those networks as you go along.
Thank you very much. So in a nutshell, amplify, project what you're doing and make it very accessible. Thank you very much for your time.
So the last panelist will be looking at self-care, and with emphasis on mental health. We've heard from so many people about how their academic journey has created a lot of nightmare in terms of mental health problems. So as Black academics, how can we manage our mental health? What should we do to look after ourselves and look after our families and loved ones and even our career as well? So in this panel, we have 4 speakers who are experts in their field. We have Albert, we have Professor Don, Dr. Albert Nwabe. I hope I'm pronouncing it rightly. We have Professor Don Edge, Dr. Tokumbo, Fasoye, and Dr. Lola Olamosu. So this section will be facilitated by Dr. Anyeka and ACN. So we have 3 speakers online. Then Dr. Tokumbo will be joining us in person.
Welcome to this last session, which I think should have been earlier on, only because it's talking about self-care, mental health supports, and sustainable well-being for academic career journeys. My name is Aiyenitaju. I'm a lecturer here in the University of Bristol, and it's my pleasure to be moderating this session. So obviously, mental health, well-being, mindfulness is now something very big topic, not just in the academia, but across the world. And we've assembled, or we have here, very experienced panelists who will be introducing themselves very briefly in a minute. And yeah, so just without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let the panelists introduce themselves. Just starting here with Dr. Tokumbo, who is here. I'll let him.
All right, thank you very much for having me. It's been a wonderful section being here. My name is Tokumbo Fasuri. I'm a chief. Hello, can you hear me now? Yeah, so my name is Tokumbo Fasuri. I'm a GP based in Manchester, and my day-to-day work involves, helping people to take responsibility for their health, to maximize their life. And primarily, I work more into mental health as well, which is helping people to optimize their life. So when you talk about, lifestyle optimization, not allowing your life to put a limit on what you can do in your life. And I believe that, mental health is quite important in what we do from day to day, in order to maximize our life. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just in order of as is shown on the screen, Herbert, Dr. Herbert.
Thank you, Essen. I hope you can hear me and see me clearly.
Yes.
Thank you once again. First and foremost, I want to thank Mercy and Bola and obviously the rest of the organizing committee for the conference for putting up a conference like this, because these gatherings are much needed within our community. So thank you. I hope you can see my thumbs up. Bola and Mercy, if you're there, super. So my name is Herbert. I am an associate professor of mental health at University of Roehampton in London. I obviously my portfolio is massive. I lecture on postgraduate, undergraduate. Of course, I've got some research obviously responsibility as well. But I do other bits away from the university. So I work with the Ministry of Justice and the Care Quality Commission to do various other things, and many other things I do to keep myself interested and occupied. But lovely to meet you all.
Thank you very much. Professor Dawn Edge.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Can you hear me all right? Yes? Yeah. So just to echo Dr. Mutebi's thanks for the invitation, for being here, and I hope we're going to have a lively discussion. My background is I'm a professor of mental health and inclusivity. I also have a role as academic lead at the University of Manchester for race, religion and belief, and I'm a director of inequality, diversity and inclusion research unit within a mental health trust, amongst many other things. I'll stop there in the interest of time.
Thank you very much. And last but not the least, Dr. Lola Olamusu.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this day. Can you hear me? Yeah, that's excellent. And I found the topic interesting because in the last 3 years since the pandemic, I've been trying to live well-being, look after myself. So I thought I would be happy to share some of the things I do with you. During the week, I work 2 days in a Devon prison and 3 days in a Dorset outpatient clinic, practicing psychiatry for general adults. That's those between the ages of 18 and 65. Thank you for inviting me to this conference.
So thank you very much. Obviously, as you can see, our panel is very diverse and very rich in experience. We want to dive straight in. I'm conscious of time. So today, what we find is in the academia, obviously in the previous session, Gillian said that this concept of self-care, mental health, well-being is put at the bottom. It's hard enough to be an academic. You have to worry about teaching, you have to worry about research, grant writing, and all of those. And now, like we've heard recently, you also have to worry about ECRs as well. So so why is self-care important, especially as a Black academic, and why should it be prioritized?
Right. Okay.
I'll start with you here, Tokumbo.
Right. Okay, thank you very much for that question. I'm going to start with a bit of the bad news, and then I'll come to the good news. Now, the first bad news is that as a Black academic, you're more likely to suffer from mental health problems. In fact, only physicians and nurses are worse off when it comes to mental health problems across all professions. And interestingly, research has shown that within the next few years, 1 out of every 3 academics, they're going to be out. So there's high attrition rate. And also the risks of depression and anxiety is higher in academics compared to the general population. Now, if you now factor in being Black into that, that's even make that worse. So that's the bad news. I'm sorry. And I'm really sorry to be a bearer of bad news. But the whole essence of this gathering is to, develop a proactive approach in, number one, identifying the mental health issues and also taking personal responsibility to really, use self-care to prevent all these bad statistics. So when we talk about self-care, what is self-care? Now, the key word there is about intention. That is intentionally practicing nurturing yourself to prevent yourself from becoming one of these statistics I've mentioned. That is, thinking about, meditation, developing healthy habits so that you don't become one of these statistics I've mentioned. So self-care is basically the intentionally practice of nurturing yourself through mindfulness, through meditation, through helpful habits, to prevent the strain of being an academic. Because we know about this, concept of publish or perish. It's there in the academics. So self-care helps you to prevent yourself from getting into this phase. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Actually, I just before coming here saw a report from UCU that almost 1 in half of academics actually experience some form of depression or mental health challenge.
Yeah.
I don't know if Herbert, if you have something to add to this.
Yes, of course. I do agree with Steve. And just before I give my response, just a bit of a clarity. I am not a doctor yet. I am at the tail end of my PhD. So I don't want to cause a war on social media about falsification of. So just to make, and I'm quite happy for you to refer to me as Herbert, if you do. If that's all right with you. But I totally agree with what Steve has intimated, and I agree. There are so many challenges at the university, particularly facing Black academics, and I'm sure the earlier session did reinforce some of the themes around sort of Black communities facing multiple stressors, obviously including racism, discrimination, navigating sometimes complex systems of oppression within the workplace, and this does not necessarily only apply to higher education, but also other job sectors. All of these issues and factors can actually affect our mental health and well-being. And for me, really, self-care is about finding meaning in one's life, whether that is professional or personal life. And as an academic for the past nearly 18 years, I know too well the challenges I face as a Black academic through the institutions. Obviously, I have worked and I continue to work. But I think for me, the space is really to find the meaning from those academic activities I am engaging with, whether it's within external, stakeholders, within also the university systems, to try to find out what my beat is. And most of us we would know what our beat is in terms of, do we recognize where our stress triggers are? Do we recognize where we are finding ourselves under so much pressure? And I think sometimes we don't listen much to ourselves when we are going through those issues in the workplace. And I think for Black academics, we have so many stresses where we find ourselves, fighting against the system. We are doing too much. We want to please to get promotions. And I think sometimes it's about listening to your inner voice, to your inner self, and say, well, enough is enough. I've got to stop, and to be able to look after your mental well-being. But I'll stop there to allow others to chip in.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Herbert. Dawn, I started my career in University of Manchester, so I did my PhD there. So I'm sure you'd have something to say about why you feel self-care is important, especially as a Black academic.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and welcome from your alumni. I think let's just get real. If you're sick, especially if you're seriously sick, you can't do anything. Okay, so unless you are well, you are never going to produce your best. And we're talking here not just about physical wellness, but a holistic wellness. So whole wellness in body, mind, soul, and spirit. A holistic approach to self-care, I think, is what's warranted. And I do think it has to be, as somebody has dropped into the chat and just repeated, it has to be intentional. It doesn't happen by accident. You have to get to the point, and unfortunately and sadly for some of us, it takes serious illness of ourselves or some other catastrophe that we know from somebody else, that we see in somebody else's life or somebody else in our family, that brings us up short and makes us realize that we're not machines. You know, what's that phrase? We are human beings and not human doings. And so many of us have been brought up in households and within a culture where, you know, we've been told that whole thing about you've got to work twice as hard or 5 times as hard or 10 times as hard. And, you know, as a Black woman, you've got to be a strong Black woman. All of these kind of things that make us think we've just got to keep going, and we can't show any sign of weakness, and we can't take time to self-care, as Herbert said, and you know, and I said, there's all these other stuff I want to tell you about. Many of us are not just doing full-time or part-time academic work. We're also parents. We're often caring for people older than ourselves. We're doing stuff in the community. For those of us who are in faith communities, often have very senior roles in our churches, mosques, you know, wherever we are. So we've got multiple roles, all of which are demanding. And somehow we think then, or we, from wherever it's come, and maybe that's a conversation from another time, we think saying, I am tired, I need to rest, I need to take time out, is some sign of weakness. And there's some work that we need to do as individuals to take ownership and responsibility for that. But that doesn't happen in a vacuum. It takes all of us to enable that and to give them right messages. And I think in academia, it does start with those of us who are supervisors, with our PhD students. So I talk to my PhD students about taking time out, about being very clear about them needing holidays, about them not working extra long days. I make it a practice not to send them late night emails or early morning emails, because that sets the tone of expectation for what we're all supposed to do. So I'll stop there. I'm sure we'll pick up some of those points later on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dawn. I think you touch on very, very important points. Dr. Lola, I don't know if you have anything to add to what they've said.
I think, thank you, Tokumbo, Herbert, and Dawn. You spoke brilliantly. Just to add to what you've said, my perspective of self-care is that it is a basic need of life that should be cherished by the individual. It's something to be nurtured by everyone, and it should be part of our everyday identity, our connections, our satisfactions, our autonomy. I came to embracing self-care, practicing it, and talking more about it, having gone through the pandemic in this country. For most people of color that I knew during the pandemic, we were disadvantaged in the number of the fatalities. We were disadvantaged in how much work we were having to do. And all the support systems in place to support people at that time during the pandemic was on a pause. So coming to the end of it, there were a lot of people who were walking, going to work, who had burnt out, which had never seen that many of colleagues in that state before. And I delved more into, I need to do more. I really don't want to. I had my own impacts, but I didn't want to be at the point that I was seeing some other people at. And I looked at it and thought, okay, my experience of self-care is, for example, on introducing myself, I said I worked 2 days in a Devon prison, 3 days in a community mental health team in Dorset. It sounds like, why is she going all over the place? But that was my own way of managing my work, that I'm not doing the same thing throughout the week. I was diversifying. There is a need. There's work pressures and all that, but if it works for me. So for self-care, you need to identify yourself, know who you are. And for most, I speak for most Africans, your name tells a lot about who you are. So try and find out the meaning of your name and start to live it. Start to cherish it. Start to celebrate it. And that way you recognize yourself more. And when you've recognized yourself, put yourself as priority. Celebrate every success. Leave the failures for learning and reflections, but celebrate every success. We come from a background where we've been brought up with a lot of myths and taboos. Why should I blow my trumpet? That's arrogance. It's no arrogance. You've got a golden trumpet, blow it. Because if I see my neighbor with his golden trumpet, I'm going to be envious. I'm not going to go celebrating my neighbor straight away. So you've got it, blow it, show it off, show your good qualities. And as academicians, we're not only responsible for ourselves, as Don said, we're operating in many roles. There needs to be a balance of our life. And if we are not 100%, we cannot give good quality to those who rely on us for some support or another. And maintaining our well-being for that reason is important. If you're not 100%, I'm not sure I want you to be my trainer, my mentor, my teacher. I want to know that whoever is passing on knowledge onto me in one form or another has got the best that they are offering me. I don't want 40%. I don't want some of your 40%. I want some of your 100%. I'm sure we'll talk about other tips as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lola, for that. I think in the previous panel, Professor Amanze said, learn how to say no. You know, sometimes saying, you know, I just can't do it, I'm tired, is should not be seen as a sign of weakness. I think Dawn also touched on that. So I want us to go now a bit deeper into sort of these challenges. We know self-care is important. So what are the challenges? Why are we not, engaging in this? So what sort of challenges do Black academics face? And I want to take this from a gender perspective. So female versus male academics. So I don't know. I'll start off with Dawn. Dawn, I don't know, as you're a female Black academic. So what specific challenges do you encounter in relation to self-care and mental health support and all of this?
I think they come at different levels, and I won't take too much time because I'm mindful that we're very short of time and other people want to speak. But if we start at the kind of at the personal level, and how that interlinks with the cultural milieu in which we were brought up. So many of us have internalized the myths and stereotypes about mental health. And again, I guess I should say here, I think one of the things that we're a bit lazy and a bit, as a society, a bit lazy in the way we use language, a bit careless, because when we talk about mental health, that is a good thing. We all aspire to having good mental health. What we're talking about is when people are unhealthy, and how we get back to be in alignment, in balance, and having good mental health. So I think we ought to separate out good mental illness from mental health, and there of course is all the stuff in between. So I think some of the challenges that we have, so I'm going to focus on the challenges of maintaining good mental health, because I think mental illness is maybe for another conversation. I think for many of us, the stuff that I touched on already, the expectations of other people, those that we put on ourselves, the things that we've internalized from a time we were small, and especially, and this is where I think some of the gender things come from. I can speak only for my own household. I remember growing up and there was definitely a bit of a gender divide. I know it's not the same in all families. So while my brothers were able to go and play and whatever else, I was inside having to help with the housework. I was still having to do my my studies. You know, there were all other kind of things that I was expected to do on top of you know, being a good student. And I think that kind of sets us up, sets the tone for those levels of expectations. And then, you know, mentioning you're in church. So I was very early on, I was asked to become a youth leader, Sunday school, and all of those things just pack up. What nobody taught me to do is to say no. Nobody taught me how to say, when somebody's asking me to do something else, okay, if you're asking me to do that, what is it you want me to not do? Because I can't do that and the other three things that I've already agreed to do. Or I'll be happy to do that, but I can't do it for 6 months because, and you don't always have to give an explanation. A very powerful phrase that someone taught me is, no is a complete sentence. You don't have to give explanation. It's enough just to say no. But we're not taught how to do this. And I think certainly we, and again, you know, I can only speak for my own family and for my own cultural background, that sense that you know, and I think it's common to those of us from collectivist cultures where the I is seen as being, you know, when you assert I is seen as being quite a negative thing. It's much more denying self in service of others. And again, this is where the interplay with things like your culture and your faith. So certainly in terms of religion, the idea that, you know, you can do more and more, and then people will use scripture, you know, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. All of these things that make you feel that by saying no, by stopping, by taking a true Sabbath rest, all of these things that actually are part of our faith that we don't do so well. Practicing meditation, going for walks, all of the things that he talks about, you know, do you not know that your body is the temple of the Lord? Look after it. But we're not taught how to apply those scriptures in the way that we're taught about the ones that promote overworking and overachieving. So again, I'll stop there and instead of letting others.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dawn. Herbert, Dawn has talked about culture, saying, you know, obviously that's a key challenge, you know, the cultural, you know, divide. What do you have to add to that?
Thank you, Don. I completely 100% agree with the submissions that Don has provided about the interplay and intersectionality between mental health and culture. And I think this is ever so the case, particularly regarding men's health. I mean, I think most of us in this forum today are Africans or have got African heritage. And for men of an African background, and I think men in general, really, we do struggle a lot to express, to vocalize our feelings and our emotions. And in my day job, I see this quite often, not just, you know, within my academic space, my professional colleague space, but also in our students who obviously encounter various challenges. But obviously, we know that 1 in 5 or in 6 of us will suffer from a mental health problem at one point in life. And for men, it is particularly challenging because whilst, you know, maybe half of those presenting with various mental problems may be able to seek help or to talk about the various challenges, we know in particular that men do struggle to actually interface with, you know, healthcare providers, with services, and also even being able to be open about those challenges. with people around them, whether those are their loved ones. And this often sometimes determines the outcomes in this population. And I think it is a challenge, particularly within the universities, because there are a lot of sort of cross divides about people either not feeling respected, or sort of going for academic promotions, or sort of being able to sort of to go to meetings and to vocalize their feelings, their views, and be respected if they come from a particular cultural background. For example, I mean, I sit in so many meetings, I've sat in so many meetings, and as a Black academic, I sometimes feel like I have sort of a lot of good things to say. I want to articulate them, I do articulate them, but there's always, well, yeah, okay, well, maybe, yeah, who's next in line to speak, and all of those sort of microaggressive sort of incidents sometimes can affect not just the men, but also the women. And if you take away all of that through an accumulation of all of these things in your academic journey or career, they can really evolve and become psychological worries and so on and so forth. So again, I think for men, we are quite delicate. I always tell my wife, please, wifey, please treat me delicately, because men, we break, we come across as very strong, and we have the muscles, we are 6 foot, but we are actually very, very emotionally, sort of unable to cope. So, but I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Give others chance.
Thank you, Herbert. Dr. Lola, I don't know, do you have anything to add to this, just very briefly?
Yes. I just wanted to add that our well-being should not just be interpreted as, our mental well-being should not just be interpreted as feelings. They're a bit more. It should be linked instead to our productivity, our performance, our outcomes. It shouldn't be just about us looking good or promoting looking good for others. It should be about us quietly helping others. When we think of our background, openly helping others, caring for others collectively, and doing this regularly. We stand to gain from social interaction with others. And it's about maintaining that without losing our own well-being, should I say, repeating that word. Where I'm coming from is that, personally, I'm saying we need to prioritize ourselves. When you can recognize yourself and balance things by having a work-life balance. What is work? The academics that we do, the teaching, the students we mentor. What is life? Other lives. Don made a reference to spiritual life, home life. We have so many roles in the society. How do you then balance that? Don't take on more than is needed. So it's about being honest with yourself. Oh, I just had a phone call from the imam at my mosque asking me to, because I've got this mental health background, can I lead on this? As Professor Amanze said, learn to say no when that's appropriate. You have to pick your children up from school. You have to finish that marking before the school closes, the university closes for the summer holidays. So there's a lot you're juggling, which the imam is not aware of. They make that demand of you. You need each time to keep in mind that you are who you are and you don't want to throw yourself off a balance. Imagine that you're walking on a tightrope. Life goes like that. It is like that. Try and maintain the balance. How you do that? They're just very simple things I like to tell people. One, prioritize who you are. Prioritize your rest. Your rest includes your leisure. It includes your sleep. It includes things that like hobbies. It includes your physical activity, your me time. Prioritize those things. And we know how to do our work well, and I will not talk about that. It's those the little things that we need to do to try and make balance our work life in reality that I wanted to just highlight. That it's important that we put that into practice.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Lola. Very briefly, Tokumbo, what do you want to add? What challenges?
I think the first thing I would say is that a lot of us were quite surprised when Herbert says that men, we are quite emotionally delicate. And that's the stigma that we need to deal with, when it comes to mental health. Even a lot of us don't believe that men are delicate. I'm very delicate. I need to be protected. And that stigma is a big issue for us, because one thing about stigma is that, mental illness itself is not a problem. It's the stigma that we attach to it that's a problem. And that's what creates a lot of more problem. Because the way to recovery when it comes to mental illness is, number one, talking about it. Men don't like to talk about their mental health issues at all. They're like, because you're seen as being weak. You are expected to be emotionally resilient as a man. You're supposed to man up and show that you can handle all of these things. And this often can lead to performance anxiety, where you need to prove that you're competent, prove that you can do a lot of things. And without knowing this can carry on and begin to affect the mental health of men. And in the same way for women, women are seen as superpower. You have this superwoman syndrome, where you're expected to be able to do a lot of things. You're supposed to be able to multitask. You're able to do a lot of things. And without knowing, coupled with the fact of dealing with the racial discrimination and sexism, which is in the academics as well, a lot of women, without knowing, begin to take on more issues, more work, and before they know it, it tends to lead to burnout. So what I like to say is that when it comes to mental illness, we need to deal with the stigma that comes with it, particularly for men. Let's speak out, let people know about our struggles. And then for women, it's about facing the dual challenges of racism and sexism, which we find in academics, and knowing that everybody must take responsibility for their mental health. And I like what Prof said at the time about mentorship. I think it's quite important for senior academics to really open up and let ECR know that, okay, I've been through it. It's not new, and hold their hand to make people realize that having mental health issue as a career academics, or it's normal, and being open about it, because being open about it creates a safe space to come and share your feeling, share your worries, celebrate your wins, and help you to go through that phase in your career journey. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I think you raised a very important point about stigma. I'm going to take you on more on that now. So how then can we, as Black academics in this discussion, integrate this self-care, this mental health, this consciousness? How do we integrate it in our academic journey?
Right. Imagine 4 years ago, if I told you I had COVID, I believe all of you are going to run out of this room. Is that correct? But at the moment, COVID is like common flu. Get on with it. And that's what stigma is like. So the first thing we need to talk about is we need to normalize mental health issues. We should normalize and make it look like it's real. There's nothing to be afraid about. The thing about stigma is that it isolates that person and silences the person from getting help. So the first thing that we must normalize it, it's okay not to be okay. And there's nothing wrong about saying that. So at different levels, individual level, at meetings like this, it's very important to normalize mental health issues, because when we normalize it, it helps people to come out and speak out and get the necessary help they need. And also creates, we must create, meetings like this, either mentorship that help people to just come up and open up about their struggles and, listen to other people who have been through that and get the help they need. So the first thing is that we must normalize it. It's normal not to be okay. There's nothing wrong about it. It doesn't make you less of a man than you are if you open about your mental health struggles. And most importantly, make sure you access help, get help when you can get it, to take you from where you are to where you need to be.
Thank you. I think the key point there is it's okay not to be okay. Dr. Lola, I wonder if from maybe a practitioner perspective, you can come in on this discussion.
Yes, about stigma. What I would advise is that we start to practice compassion towards those who have had a mental illness or another. And that way it will lessen the stigma. As academicians, we're well positioned because we interact with young, upcoming people. And if we can start to demonstrate that it's okay to experience mental disorder, mental distress at any point in one's life, they will learn from us, the compassion we show, and hopefully that will destigmatize what mental difficulties are. In everyday practicality, what that could look like is not just talking about it, but talking about it is good. But also being able to show people, you associate with people who have mental disorder and openly talk about it. I'm not suggesting going on social media, but whatever opportunity you get, we come from, most Africans come from a background where you don't even talk about your health, let alone mental health. Is the people would rather have cancer than have mental disorder.
Yeah.
But I think the more, even going back to Africa, the more we show compassion for the sufferers, the less the stigma will be. I know we still have a long way to go, but as those in a position of educating, like most of us are in this conference, and for the medics here, let us continue to just promote that compassion towards the sufferers and not be too judgmental about people's experiences. As I take, for example, a female Black doctor working in the southwest of England. It's taken me years to desensitize the stigma of mental health. When I see other people of color in the southwest, they come to clinic and they want to, it takes almost double slots. It takes longer for them to express themselves. I've over time come to develop, you know what? I'm just like you. I'm Black, I'm female, I'm medic. I tell you, these are my struggles over the years, and this is what I do. And we try to encourage people to walk tall about whatever difficulties that they have experienced. And I hope that will continue to desensitize the stigma around mental health difficulties.
Thank you so much, Lola. I think, Dawn, you want to add something?
Yes,
Briefly.
thank you. So I think all of those things are really, really important. I think the other thing we also need to do is to really get real again about how in many of our communities, and this is not just for Black communities, in many global South communities, anything that suggests mental ill health is seen as being either some kind of degenerate or spiritual, maybe demonic possession. There are lots and lots of other explanations for what mental health difficulties it might be. There are still parts of the diaspora where people are sent to witch camps. So there are people maybe on this call who, if there is mental illness in your family, you know that your daughters are never going to get married. Nobody wants to marry them because they think it's going to be transmitted. And going back to the point that was made about COVID, when it first came out, nobody knew what COVID was, but very quickly, because we kept on talking about it and being told that it was high temperature, fever, all of these things, you began to understand. And even when the symptom profile changed, we were sufficiently familiar with it to be able to recognize it. And that's part of the problem. We don't even recognize what some of the issues are. Some of us who may be experiencing depression or anxiety or whatever, we don't necessarily recognize those symptoms in ourselves or in our families or in our colleagues because we don't talk enough to be familiar enough with the symptoms. Like we would be able to differentiate between a common cold and flu. We need to have those kind of conversations so that we're able to understand what we need to get help for and where to get that help. What do we need to take to the pastor or to the imam, and what do we need to take to someone like that, Dr. Lola?
Thank you very much, Dawn, for that addition. I've just been told that we have almost run out of time, if not run out of time. So I'm just going to ask a question, and I just want each of you to mention just one. So what strategies can we as Black academics adopt to sort of prioritize mental health or self-care? I'll start with Herbert, just one.
Thank you. Yeah, engaging with community, societal activities. So again, knowledge exchange, transfer of that knowledge, whether globally, locally, and making sure that you're part of communities and having those conversations and making sure that if you're undertaking research or as an academic, that you can translate that in your communities and sort of gel with them.
Thank you. So speak to people. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said when I started, the first thing about being intentional. If you don't make time for it, it's not going to happen. You might have 1,000 papers to publish. If you become unwell, you only have one paper, and that's to get well. Yeah. So that's very important.
Thank you. Thank you. Dawn?
Yep, take that holistic approach, body, soul, mind, and spirit, look after each area and nurture. And I think that connection with community, but talking to the right people, using the tools that are available. There's lots and lots of really good stuff out there. But yeah, a holistic approach.
Lola?
I just want to share this information. Can you hear me?
Yes, sure.
Yes. And that is a very simple exercise called deep breathing. You don't need, we all do it. We all breathe. Just deep breathe now and again. It's a well-known stress reducer. As many times as you like, do it throughout the day. It reduces anxiety, it improves, it just, it breaks the cycle of whatever stress you're going through. So let us practice deep breathing. Don't wait till when someone has really annoyed you and you think, I want to count to 10. No, you might not be able to breathe at that time. It might be anger and anxiety brewing up, but let's just practice deep breathing. I hope that's, if everybody goes away today without taking anything from what I've said, I want you to practice deep breathing. That's the only thing to take away from me.
Thank
you.
It
does
Thank
help.
you, Lola. Thank you, Lola. Shall we practice deep breathing now?
Yes.
How long do we need to hold our breath?
No, there's no time, there's no rhythm. You just take in a deep breath. And you can make it loud.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we give a round of applause to our panelists? I think it's been really intriguing and exciting. Thank you so much, those who joined online and obviously Tokumbo here. I don't know if there's questions in the audience. Okay, I see a few hands. Any questions online, please? Hopefully, Mercy can check. But we have Dr. Ogale here.
Hello. It's not really a question. It's just to say, I think one of us said it. I don't know if it's Dr. Lola. I just want to stress being compassionate to one another, for one another. We've talked a lot about sponsoring people, mentoring people. Some of these are the issues that cause the stress. So we need to be compassionate with one another, especially for early career researchers who are struggling even to get into work. I like what Fatima said. And I just want to say, we who are senior need to help one another. Let's not forget the journey. We tend to forget sometimes. And that's why I'm saying we need to be compassionate, because that's what, it's just about saying, hey, I know the struggle. I've been there. How can I help you? That can make the difference before one person getting that role and giving up in depression and in a mental state. I just want to stress, even as we leave here, we've said so many things, but we are all human beings, first of all. We all have emotions. We all need one another to survive. And let's help one another to thrive.
Thank you. There's a question, I think, lady in red.
Thanks. Yes, that's me. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so there is a lot of support for students for their mental health, and there is a lot of programs for them to actually be able to persevere. And they have mentors, they have tutors and so on. I just wanted to ask, because you're from different institutes, what are the supports you have for staff? If you're aware of something that's specific for staff, not for students?
I think that maybe would be directed to Dawn, who is mainly in the academics, but any other person can feel free to chip in. I don't know. Were you asking specifically to anyone, or just, yeah?
So I'm happy to say I think it's really important for us, as we've said, as academics, to model what we've been talking about here. So people learn far more from what they see us do, from what they hear us say, and what we tell them to do. So we need to model that behavior. We also need to advocate within our institutions. We've not really talked about the institutional responsibility and their duty of care to staff and students. So we need to lobby within our institutions to have good quality mental health care, to make sure that when people do need care and reach out, that those services are able to deliver culturally informed, trauma-informed care, including being aware of the impact of racism and seeing that as a form of trauma and being able to deal with it. And if the people within our institutions don't have those skills, knowledge skills, that level of expertise, then we should be advocating, lobbying for them to buy it in, or for referring people out. And in Greater Manchester, I don't know if others have done it since, but we set up a mental health services for students that gives a fast track into mental health services across our 5 Greater Manchester universities. So there are ways of doing it. There's a mental health charter. If you've not signed up to that, get your institution to sign up and make sure that you write into it something specifically about culturally informed and racially informed care.
Yeah. Don't have mental health support for some. I mean, I'm just asking, just know if my institute is not the only one that doesn't have as much.
I'm not sure she can hear you.
I was just saying, does that mean you don't have specific things support to staff? I'm not asking as like accusing your institutes for not supporting staff. I'm just asking to see what other things are there in other institutes, so I can I can try to work something in our institute and say, well, other people are doing this. This is good practice in the community of higher education, so we can actually start doing this at our institution. So I'm just trying to see if your institutes are implementing something to support staff, like what we do for students, and then I can have ideas to try to advocate for it in my own institute.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time, so I'm happy for you to contact me and I can share some of the things that we're doing. I'm sure other people would be too.
Thank you, Dawn.
Just to read a couple of comments from the online audience. One said, I think we need to emphasize that Black academics should take vacation and mental health vacations to ease off stress. Your mental health can be impacted when you're constantly thinking of work. I think this is essential. We need to emphasize that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mercy. I think we just won't have time for only one last question. And very briefly, Tash, please go for it.
Thank you. Sorry, mine's actually directed at Dawn. Thank you for your contribution earlier, where you said that we have so many roles that we take on, and it was around being an academic, but I'm also my experience last year. When you become so consumed by your work, you love what you do, but you've also been asked to take on more. And then something last year happened where I was passed for a role. There were so many underlying factors that had happened. I was intentionally asked, to do my interview while on holiday, loads of factors, and essentially it caused me to spiral. So I'm being very vulnerable here. My question to you is, when you become so consumed, but you have various roles, I know that you mentioned earlier, to say no, what would your core tips be here, for all of us here? How do you really identify and pause in that moment? And what would you say has helped you in the past when you do get so overwhelmed that it is now spiraling, but I can't just stop?
Yeah, great question. And I think one of the key things, this is what we were saying before about being connected to community. So you really need, if you can find an accountability partner or some accountable sisters, people who will tell you about yourself, as my friend would say, and who will help you to identify when things are getting difficult before you get to that crisis point. So and for you to help you to be able to to empower you to say no. Because sometimes when you're deep in it and you're so overwhelmed, that's when it's really hard to take that step back, to take the deep breath and go, actually, no, not right now. So I think being connected to other people, but people are going to be really honest with you. If you can develop a great relation, if you're lucky enough to have a really good relationship with your line manager, and making sure all good line managers should have well-being as part of the appraisal, supervision, PDR process. They don't always. So I make, and I'm very blessed that I do. But I think when that doesn't happen, we have to write it in. We need to write ourselves into those processes that sometimes deny who we are, and the extra burden that being who we are in predominantly white spaces brings with them. So I think we need, that's the bit where I do agree with the previous conversation about proactivity. There were lots of the other things I think maybe not, but this is one where we have to be proactive about our own self and recognizing that self-care is probably the most radical act we'll ever do.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's as much as we have time for. So in summary, mental health self-care is important. To prioritize it, speak about it, speak up about it, be intentional, take a holistic approach, and practice deep breathing. Once again, a big thank you to all of our panelists. Round of applause for them, please. Thank you very much. And I think that's everything. I'll hand over back to Mercy now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We need to practice taking a deep breath. So let's start by practicing now. Take a deep breath. Release it. How do you feel? Better. Thank you for joining us. I mean, we are almost done. So are they supposed to give the closing remark? Are you online? And
yes,
Professor Steve, you're also expected to give the closing remark. So over to you guys.
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Ade?
Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Mercy, could you confirm if you could hear me before I continue?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, all right. Good evening, everyone. I mean, I've been listening to the conversations from the keynote from our guest speaker, the Vice Chancellor and President of the University of Bristol, over to the session on creating spaces that was moderated by Dr. Teslim, to the third session on the impact or understanding of voice, to amplifying impact, and also to self-care, which is the last session we've just had today. And I think I just want to applaud all the speakers for your wonderful contributions. I think these are very important points, important topics to discuss as Black academics. But as I was reflecting on all these different conversations that we've had today, 2 points or 2 words came to my mind. I think the first is unity. So what unifies us as Black people or as Black academics? It seems we have a common problem or a common challenge or common challenges. And it's quite important that we work together to, for example, if you think about the topic of our conference today, creating the space, the voice, and the opportunities. I don't think we can create the space, the voice, and opportunities to demonstrate Black excellence in silos. Some of these have already been discussed. I think there is a key role of unity and a community to be able to address some of these points. But another point that came to mind as I was reflecting on all these different sessions relates to it's all about the journey, not the destination. So I hope that as we round up the conference today, and as we, continue to go back to think about our careers as early career researchers, mid-career researchers, and even senior academics, people here who are already full professors or old leadership positions, I think one key point that we could perhaps reflect upon in a deeper way is that we need to think about our careers beyond just being a destination type of goal or trajectory towards building a journey. And if you think about journeys, for example, the last session on mental health really relates to that. If you think about the fact that this is a long-term career, right? We can't do things that will in next 10 years harm our career or harm our mental or our well-being as individuals. Then if you think about being a journey rather than a destination, if you think about creating spaces that could enable that journey to be a fruitful journey, if you think about the power of voice being a pivotal tool that would enable that journey to be impactful, or even issues around impact. So I really hope that you found this conference really insightful, interesting for you, and beneficial to your career development as you progress in your career. I would really like to thank, all the different stakeholders, and I would identify them in a second, that have put this event together. I want to emphasize, first of all, that to plan an event like this, it might look quite basic, but there is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to get these types of events to fruition, particularly when it's a free event. Nothing is ever free. We've had to bring speakers from north, west, east, and south of the country to come in, and many of these people have contributed their time, and even people that have joined us online without requesting any financial reward. And I really want to appreciate our speakers for that. And secondly, I want to appreciate the hosts of this conference, the University of Bristol, particularly Professor Steve. I mean, the way we came across Steve was very phenomenal. We just contacted him last minute as we were struggling to find a host for our conference. Steve opened the door. He had been doing a lot of work around EDI, even though he's a white academic. And without Steve, we wouldn't be having this conference. So Steve, openly, I say thank you, and we all appreciate you. I would like us to give Steve a round of applause if we can. Steve, thank you very much. And of course, to the team at Bristol, to Rashida and your team, I think you've done a very good job to host us, to have us as a Society of Black Academics. So thank you very much, Rashida, and to your team. And finally, I want to thank the SBA team members, from our project manager, Mercy Denedo, to our external engagement manager, Dr. Bola Babajide, to our education manager, Dr. Opeoluwa Aiyenitaju, to our then please, you can give them a round of applause as well. These are the individuals that have made this conference possible. And then to our events manager, Steve Iofa. I mean, they've worked really hard behind the scenes to enable this conference to hold. So these are my closing remarks. I hope why we have SBA is to create a platform for us to be able to come together as Black academics to address some of the issues that we might not be able to address in our respective places of work, but also in a place that is not filled with Black people that understand our Black specific challenges. And I wanted to emphasize that we have a couple of initiatives that we're actually working on as a society beyond our report with LP and GS, Getting by Sanderson. I'm sure you've come across that report. We are working to create a platform for Black academics to be able to be matched with senior academics for mentorship. So this is something that we are working on. Please watch out for some of the announcements that will come about relating to this initiative sometime in the future. I think the second point was about, and I think this will be mentioned later or displayed on the screen, was about the fact that if you are interested in being part of SBA, particularly from the organizing or behind the scenes perspective, please do reach out to us via info@societyofblackacademics.com. Thank you very much. I hope you've had a very good conference. And Steve, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I won't say very much because I realise that the day is late and it's probably time to go home. It's been an absolute pleasure to host this here. I've learnt a lot. I've sat back and listened. I wish that some more of my senior leaders here would have stayed a bit longer to hear what had been said, but somehow we will get your messages back to them. and we'll continue working with SBA, I hope, into the future here at Bristol, but also more collectively. I've heard lots of messages today. Somebody said black people, black academics are not a monolith. I've seen a lot of diversity today. I read there was a title of a song that I read this morning, and it said, if everyone is someone, nobody is everyone. So we're all individuals, but particularly it's often in institutions that black academics are dealt with collectively. If they're lucky, they might get dealt with collectively as black academics. But you're all individuals with your own needs, and I just hope that those get met when you go back to your institutions. And, you know, safe journey home, and keep safe. Keep finding those safe spaces, and let's keep talking and learning. So thank you very much. Thank you.
In conclusion, I just need to say a big thank you to all our volunteers. We have Chinonzom here. Thank you so much. We have Stephanie over there. Thank you so much. We really appreciate all you've done for us today. We have Ogale. From the bottom of my heart, I say thank you. And also we have Aniekan as well. Thank you. And many thanks to all the attendees, both in person and online. You've made today a great one. So thank you for coming, and hope you've learned something from today's conference. Thank you. See you soon. Bobby, thank you. Also, we need your feedback, please. If you can quickly scan this QR code and provide us feedback, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Working now? No. Please come. Yes, let's have a family picture. Please, before you leave, let's come. Exactly. Emmanuel, let's have picture. Thank you. Then finally, we can have our networking sessions. You want to catch up with one another. Please, everyone, let's come down to the stage. Thank you. Everyone, please, let's have our pictures. Please, can I have our volunteers to help coordinate this? Chinoso, please, can you get everyone? Yeah. All right. Rashida, please help me encourage them to come up. Yeah. Everyone, you catch up later. Let's have our pictures. Dr. Tokes, you're going to exchange phone numbers soon. Men are delicate.
Who is taking the pictures?
We have photographer. Oh, we have you. I've been having so many. Thank you very much.
The registration.
Okay.
There's a
So that's our photographer.
I put the rest of the name tag, but I've also put the sign-in sheets because there's a lot of email addresses inside.
All right, everyone, please let's come. Are you interested? Yeah, yeah. All right. So please, how best can we coordinate ourselves? How do we go? This way.
Oh, wow. Sorry, just give me a moment. I've been asked to take some photos on this phone. So I've done. Yeah, and I'll try. Oh my goodness, okay. I need a bigger camera. Oh, okay, we'll a couple more, just for a look. SBA. Oh, because I haven't got a wide angle lens. That's okay. I'll move back. In the middle, yeah. Okay, I'll see what these produce.
The name tag. You're going outside, is it? Okay, collect the name tag.